Imagine that you have a flat tire. You take your car to the mechanic to get it repaired. The mechanic tells you that it will take 4 days to repair your car. And you're kind of surprised because you don't see any other customers in the shop. You don't see any other cars in the garage. So you ask him, why is it going to take so long? He tells you that before he can repair your flat tire, he needs to investigate some questions he has about the material properties of rubber, the physical characteristics of round objects and motion. Now, in this scenario, you don't know all that much about mechanics or cars, and so you allow this quack to work on your car. 4 days later, you pick up your car, and within 1 hour of driving away, you have a flat tire again. You take it back to him, and he promises to make it right. 4 days later, the same thing happens. And you want to give him just one more chance, so he tries again. 12 days later, you still don't have a car you can drive. You would be outraged to receive service like this from a mechanic. Because after all, it doesn't matter how much a mechanic knows about the material properties of rubber. If he can't fix your tire, he probably shouldn't be a mechanic. At a time when enrollment numbers are dropping and the value of a 4-year degree is steadily declining, a similar kind of fraud is taking place in research universities across America and around the world. Universities tell parents they will give their children an education for the future, advertise to the governments that fund them that they will train the leaders of tomorrow. All too often, many of the people who are supposed to be training young minds spend much of their time on something almost completely unrelated to the teaching mission of universities. In short, the problem with today's research institutions is that while they claim to be about offering students an education, altogether too many faculty spend more time on their own research than they do improving the quality of their teaching. While this seems like a fairly straightforward problem, if we really understand it, we need to dive into not only the exact nature of the problem, but figure out how it is that universities have gotten to this point before finally looking at some solutions that will hopefully ensure that universities continue to exist in the future. In theory, universities have two separate and supposedly equal missions, you see, teaching and research. In practice, at many research institutions, teaching gets pushed to the side. A 2004 study by the National Center for Education Statistics found that 32.6% of professors at top research universities in the United States self-reported spending less than 1 hour per week in the classroom. Less than 1 hour per week. This statistic is a little bit old, but it's also really difficult to explain away, because at least at accredited institutions, professors are supposed to spend a minimum of 2.5 hours per week in the classroom teaching one course alone. So either many of these people simply aren't teaching, they're spending far less time than they should in the classes that they teach. I don't want to give you the idea, though, that research professors are lazy, because they're not. Research is time-intensive, it's hard work, it's even valuable, just not to the exclusion of teaching. But all the time that is spent on research often leads professors to sort of push teaching to the side in their day-to-day work. And what does that look like in universities, in classes, students experience? Well, this is what it looks like. A lot of teaching at large research institutions will be done by part-time adjuncts, or young teaching assistants who haven't yet finished their degrees. At such institutions, professors will often rely more and more on computer-graded examinations, less and less on more nuanced work that requires the professor to spend time giving feedback, allows the student to show their progress, things like projects, essays. At such institutions, class sizes balloon. They get larger and larger. and the amount of time that students have with their professors shrinks. At these institutions, classes also tend to have one or two assessments, a midterm worth 50% and a final worth 50%. Without some of the smaller, more meaningful assignments that we know allow students to grow and show their progress and development over the course of the semester. If real education is like a hand-stitched luxury designer bag, what many students in research institutions are getting is a cheap, mass-produced, partially machined, generic product. But why do so many professors spend so much time on research? It really boils down to two things. First of all, there are policies that institutions have that disincentivize professors from focusing on teaching. And second, there's a negative attitude toward teaching that really grows out of those policies. First, research institutions have all kinds of ways for measuring the success of a faculty member's research. It can be something really simple and easily quantifiable, like the number of grant dollars that a professor pulls in, or it can be something more nuanced, like the quality of a journal that they publish in, the impact factor of a particular publication on the field. But there are all kinds of ways easily quantifying and measuring the success of research. Teaching, on the other hand, is often just not assessed. Or, in some places, it's assessed in ways that everyone understands are not exactly meaningful. One such example would be taking into account only the reviews of teaching by students at the end of the semester. And because teaching either isn't reviewed or isn't assessed in a meaningful way, it's not a significant part of the promotion process for faculty who do research. It's technically a part of it, but it's often quietly dismissed in those processes. And so research faculty feel obliged to focus on their research, to focus on measurable outcome they can perform well at. Also, at such institutions, there are no real incentives for teaching faculty, that is, teachers, faculty who are primarily responsible for teaching, to improve their teaching, because they often don't have promotion opportunities. But it's not just these kinds of policy issues that disincentivize a focus on teaching. It's also the case that really negative institutional culture grows out of policies like this, and it affects the day-to-day work and attitude of professors. Nothing illustrates this better than the story of a faculty member I once knew. This person was a new faculty member in his department. He happened to get earned tenure and promotion. He felt pressured to meet the research demands of his department and school, deadlines as well. So he started locking himself in his office with the lights turned off during the daytime. Why did he turn the lights off? He didn't want his students to think he was there. He didn't want them to stop by, chat about the lecture, ask clarifying questions, get help with an assignment. He literally shut the door on his students to focus on research. As shameful as this person's actions may seem, they are completely understandable if we take into account the policies that discourage faculty from giving their students the education they deserve. But this problem of imbalance between teaching and research in institutions is actually pretty well known. A 2009 OECD report, for instance, found most institutions evaluate the success of their institution solely in terms of things like research output of faculty. Mostly don't take into account the quality of teaching at all. And because universities know about this problem, they've tried to address it. They often do so in ways that are counterproductive, fail to address the underlying cause. Two examples of this come to mind. One is initiatives that try to integrate teaching and research, and another is the infamous teaching war. Integrating teaching and research is a common solution. The idea is that professors will bring in their research that they're doing in the lab or the archive into the classroom. But it's not the cure-all that many administrators believe it is. First of all, because as a 2010 article in the Journal of Chemical Engineering Education points out, teaching and research involve really different skill sets. Teaching requires that someone be able to communicate, that they are approachable, open, gregarious, and friendly, able to share knowledge with people who don't know all that much about it, students. Research, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily require these skills in order to be a researcher. So we can't just assume that someone who is a good researcher will also be a good teacher. But it's not only that integrating teaching and research isn't as feasible as we often think it is, it's just also not the right direction for universities. You see, what often happens as a result of bringing in that outside information from the lab or the archive or wherever the researchers are doing it to the classroom is that in the long run, the undergraduate major, the bachelor's degree, gets turned into a research degree. Students finish their time at university well prepared to go on to graduate school, but not necessarily having the kind of skills that would make them employable outside the university. And so students rack up more and more degrees without becoming more employable in the societies in which they live. The other common solution that's tried is something called the teaching award. Teaching awards are great as far as they go, but they don't do all that much to improve teaching at the university. First, because they don't result in a wide evaluation of all the teaching of all faculty members. You see, what usually happens is only the teaching of those people who are nominated for the award is assessed. Everyone else at the university just keeps teaching like they always have. And beyond this, it's just not much of an incentive to focus on teaching, because you see, research faculty have opportunities at most institutions to secure lifelong job security through tenure. Also, promotions that come with salary increases. Next to this, a small plaque and a small cash award just doesn't really stack up in terms of the incentive. If these solutions fall short of the mark, happily there are some things that can be done. We should turn now to focusing on those. Basically, there are two things. First of all, universities need to assess the quality of teaching at their institutions. Second, leadership at universities needs to change the way they think about the purpose of their institution. Teaching needs to be evaluated. Almost any measure of quality teaching would be better than no measure of quality of teaching at an institution. But a robust system for evaluating teaching would draw on multiple data points. It would take into account not only the student feedback at the end of the semester, but also peer evaluations of faculty member performance and wider, more comprehensive review by an administrator who knew something about the field in which the faculty member was teaching. In place for measuring the quality of teaching, it would need to be made a serious part of the process for promotion and tenure, so that research faculty couldn't simply push their students to the side and focus on research and still get promoted. Beyond this, it would need to be the basis for creating promotion incentives for teaching faculty, because after all, without such incentives, teaching faculty don't have any incentive to improve either. They can just continue to do what they've always done. Promotion opportunities would incentivize them to focus on their teaching, to improve it, to innovate, to grow, to adapt their classes to the changing world in which their students live. These policy changes won't happen, though. They won't work if we don't change the way leadership at universities thinks about the purpose of universities. Like it or not, universities exist because of a social contract. And that contract requires that universities uphold their end of the bargain. And a significant element of the university's bargain is delivering quality education to their students. And if universities continue to default on their end of the bargain, they will find their resistance threatened in the future. So leadership at universities needs to reshape the way they think about the purpose of the institution, to reprioritize teaching so that they deliver the quality education that students deserve. To conclude, I don't want to leave you with the idea that research is valueless, or that every researcher you've ever met is a bad professor. Because I know all kinds of qualified and conscientious faculty who would never sacrifice their students to focus on their own career. But these people are constantly in competition with those who do sacrifice their students to do more research and who produce more quality research that raises the standards for tenure and promotion, thus in the long run forcing out the good people who give students what they deserve. It doesn't matter though how much quality research someone does. If they can't teach, they shouldn't be a professor at a university. Because if we continue to tell the public that universities are about providing an education and spend all of our time on research, if we continue to promise one thing and deliver another, if we continue to defraud the public, they will stop supporting us. Who could blame them? After all, would you send your children to a school where the teachers weren't focused on teaching